The most dangerous moment in a marriage is not when a woman screams. It is when she finally becomes quiet. The restaurant glowed gold beneath hanging crystal lights, while winter rain slid slowly down the glass windows overlooking Manhattan traffic below. Expensive laughter filled the private dining room as businessmen loosened ties and servers poured another round of wine beside plates nobody was still eating. Ryan Bennett leaned back comfortably in his chair at the head of the table, relaxed in the effortless way successful men often become after years of getting exactly what they want. Across from him, Amelia Carter sat silently beside the window wearing a black silk dress beneath a cream wool coat draped over her shoulders. Soft piano music drifted through hidden speakers overhead, while candlelight flickered against her untouched champagne glass. She looked beautiful tonight. Ryan noticed that vaguely the same way people notice background music in elevators. Present, familiar, easy to overlook. One of Ryan's business partners laughed while cutting into a steak. "So tell us the truth," he joked. "How many times has Amelia forgiven you this year already?" The table burst into knowing laughter. Ryan smirked immediately, without hesitation. "I stopped counting years ago." More laughter. Amelia lowered her eyes toward the tablecloth quietly. Ryan barely noticed. "Come on," another man added. "You are lucky. Most women would have killed you by now." Ryan shrugged casually while reaching for his whiskey glass. "Amelia gets emotional sometimes. But she always forgives me." There it was again. That word. Always. Like her loyalty was permanent furniture inside his life. Something stable. Predictable. Guaranteed. Amelia finally lifted her gaze slowly toward him across the candlelit table. For a brief second, Ryan almost felt something strange in the way she looked at him. Not anger. Not sadness. Worse. Distance. Then she simply looked back toward the rain outside the windows while city lights blurred across the glass beside her reflection. The conversation around the table kept moving naturally. Market forecasts. Vacation homes. Investment opportunities in Miami. Ryan answered questions automatically while checking messages on his phone between conversations. Beside him, Amelia remained mostly silent except for polite smiles when someone spoke directly to her. She used to fill rooms softly years ago. Ryan remembered that suddenly without understanding why. Amelia used to laugh more. Used to touch his arm while talking. Used to lean closer when he spoke. Now she looked like someone emotionally standing several miles away from the table. Halfway through dinner, Amelia quietly excused herself and disappeared toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. Ryan barely looked up from his phone. "She okay?" one of the men asked casually. Ryan waved dismissively. "She probably just needs air." Then he smirked again before taking another sip of whiskey. "Trust me, she always comes back." 20 minutes later, the dinner ended beneath soft jazz music and the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. Ryan walked through the restaurant lobby, buttoning his coat while scrolling through emails. Amelia stood near the entrance waiting silently beneath the warm golden lights. Something immediately felt different. Ryan slowed slightly as they stepped outside beneath the hotel awning where black cars lined the curb beneath cold Manhattan rain. Amelia adjusted her gloves quietly while looking toward the street. Then Ryan noticed it. Her left hand. Empty. No wedding ring. His eyes lingered there for 2 full seconds before confusion flickered across his face. "Where is your ring?" he asked automatically. Amelia looked down at her own hand as if she had almost forgotten herself. Then she answered softly, "I took it off weeks ago." Rain hammered harder against the streets around them while taxis splashed through glowing puddles beneath the city lights. Ryan stared at her in disbelief. "Weeks ago?" Amelia nodded once. Calm. Exhausted. Distant. And the truly terrifying part was not that she stopped wearing the ring. It was that Ryan Bennett had not noticed until now. The ride home felt colder after that. Rain streaked across the black windows of the town car, while Manhattan blurred outside in gold and silver reflections. But Amelia barely looked up once during the entire drive. Ryan sat beside her scrolling through emails on his phone at first, pretending the missing ring conversation had not unsettled him. He answered 2 client messages. Checked tomorrow's market opening notes. Laughed once quietly at something in a group chat. But every few minutes, his eyes drifted back toward Amelia's left hand resting calmly in her lap. Empty. The absence of the ring suddenly looked louder than anything else inside the car. "So what is this?" Ryan finally asked without looking directly at her. "Some kind of statement?" Amelia kept her gaze on the rainy streets outside. No, her voice sounded tired more than angry. It is just honest now. Ryan frowned slightly. Honest. Amelia nodded once. Silence settled between them again while windshield wipers dragged rhythmically against the storm outside. Years ago, Ryan used to love rainy nights in the city with her. They would order late dinners, open wine, sit beside the windows in oversized sweaters while Amelia played soft jazz on the piano near midnight. Back then she used to talk about everything. Design ideas, places she wanted to visit, tiny thoughts that made ordinary evenings feel warm somehow. Ryan could not remember the last time they sat together like that without one of them distracted by something else. Mostly him. The car stopped outside their Manhattan penthouse building 20 minutes later. The doorman hurried forward beneath a black umbrella while cold rain hammered against the sidewalk. Ryan stepped out first, adjusting his coat automatically. Amelia followed more slowly beside him. Inside the elevator, soft instrumental music played overhead while mirrored walls reflected the growing distance between them. Ryan suddenly realized Amelia had become quieter over the past year. Not peaceful quiet. Emotional exhaustion quiet. The kind that comes after someone stops believing talking will change anything. But at the time, Ryan thought fewer arguments meant their marriage was improving. The penthouse greeted them with darkness except for the city glow spilling through the massive windows overlooking Central Park. Amelia moved silently through the apartment, removing her coat, while Ryan loosened his tie near the kitchen counter. "You are overthinking this ring thing," he said casually, trying to lighten the mood. "You always get emotional after those dinners." Amelia paused briefly near the piano. The room stayed silent except for distant thunder outside. "Do I?" she asked softly. Ryan exhaled a short laugh. "Come on, Amelia. We are fine." That word again. Fine. The word people use when they stop looking deeper. Amelia turned slowly toward him then, and Ryan felt something uncomfortable shift in his chest. She did not look emotional tonight. She looked finished. "Ryan," she said quietly, "when was the last time you noticed anything about me before it disappeared?" He stared at her without answering. Amelia looked toward the dark windows overlooking the rain-soaked city. "You noticed the ring because it was gone." Her voice remained calm. "Not because you noticed me." Ryan opened his mouth immediately. That is not fair. But even while saying it, something inside him already knew she was right. Amelia walked toward the bedroom without another word. A few seconds later, Ryan heard drawers opening softly down the hallway. Then silence again. He poured himself another drink at the kitchen counter while storm clouds rolled over Manhattan outside the windows. The apartment suddenly felt enormous tonight. Empty in places it never used to feel empty before. Ryan glanced toward the piano in the corner and realized there had not been music in this apartment for months. He had not noticed that either. The next morning, the apartment smelled like coffee and silence. Gray winter lights spilled across the marble kitchen counters while Manhattan traffic hummed faintly 30 floors below the penthouse windows. Ryan walked into the kitchen still half distracted by overnight market updates glowing on his phone screen. His tie hung loose around his neck, and exhaustion sat beneath his eyes from another night spent answering emails past midnight. At first, everything looked normal. Amelia's coffee cup sat beside the espresso machine. The hallway lamp still glowed softly the way she always left it before sunrise. Even the jazz playlist she liked played quietly through hidden speakers near the living room. Familiar. Predictable. Safe. Ryan loosened his collar while reaching automatically for the coffee Amelia usually poured for him before he woke up. Then he stopped. The cup was empty. Cold. Beside it sat a white envelope. His name written neatly across the front in Amelia's handwriting. Ryan frowned slightly before picking it up. For one strange second, the apartment felt unusually still around him. He opened the envelope casually at first, expecting receipts, paperwork, maybe another emotional letter after last night's conversation. But the moment his eyes landed on the words "petition for dissolution of marriage," the casual expression disappeared from his face completely. Ryan stared down at the papers while distant sirens echoed somewhere far below the building. He actually laughed once under his breath at first. Short. Disbelieving. "Seriously?" he muttered to himself. Amelia stepped quietly into the kitchen wearing a cream sweater and dark jeans, her hair still slightly damp from the shower. She looked calm. Too calm. Ryan held up the papers slightly. "What is this supposed to be?" Amelia walked toward the window instead of answering immediately. Outside, snow had started falling lightly between the skyscrapers. It is exactly what it looks like, she said softly. Ryan let out another small laugh while flipping through the pages. Come on, Amelia. Divorce. He shook his head in disbelief. This is because of a ring? Amelia looked at him then. Not angry, just tired in a way Ryan had never fully noticed before. No, she answered quietly. The ring was because of this. Ryan tossed the papers back onto the counter with frustrated amusement. You are overreacting. Amelia lowered her eyes briefly. You always say that. Ryan rubbed one hand across his jaw while pacing toward the kitchen island. Because you always calm down after a few days. The words slipped out naturally, automatically, like truth he had repeated too many times to question anymore. Amelia's expression changed slightly after hearing them. Not pain, recognition, as if she had finally heard out loud what she spent years silently enduring. That is the problem, Ryan, she whispered. You stopped taking my feelings seriously because you believed I would always forgive you. Ryan opened his mouth immediately to defend himself, but nothing came out. Because standing there in the quiet kitchen with snow drifting outside the windows, he suddenly realized he could not remember the last meaningful conversation they actually finished without him dismissing it halfway through. Amelia moved calmly around the apartment afterward, collecting a few things from the hallway table. Her movements felt strangely organized. Prepared. Ryan watched her carefully now for the first time in months. Maybe years. The overnight bag beside the door. Missing photo frames from the bookshelf. Empty hangers in the closet he had not noticed earlier. Wait, Ryan said slowly. How long have you been planning this? Amelia paused near the piano. Her fingers brushed lightly against the polished black surface before she answered. Long enough to stop hoping you would notice I was unhappy on your own. Ryan felt something uncomfortable tighten in his chest then. Not panic yet, but the first sharp crack in the certainty he had carried for years. Because Amelia was not crying. She was not threatening him. She was not begging him to understand her. She looked like someone who had already mourned the marriage long before the papers ever touched the table. The apartment felt different after Amelia left that afternoon. Not emptier exactly, just colder in ways Ryan could not explain. By evening, Manhattan glittered outside the penthouse windows beneath falling snow, while traffic crawled slowly through the city below, but inside the apartment, everything felt strangely still. Ryan loosened his tie while walking through the living room with his phone pressed against his ear, pretending life was continuing normally. He discussed contracts, numbers, investor meetings. He even laughed once during the call. But every few minutes his eyes drifted toward the hallway where Amelia's suitcase had disappeared hours earlier. After ending the call, Ryan walked into the kitchen automatically expecting dinner smells, soft music, some small sign of movement from another human being. Instead, there was only silence and the faint hum of the refrigerator. He opened it without thinking. Empty shelves stared back at him. No neatly prepared containers with handwritten labels. No lemon water Amelia always kept chilled in glass pitchers. Even the strawberries she bought every week were gone. Ryan frowned slightly while grabbing a bottle of water. He twisted the cap open, took one sip, then immediately realized something ridiculous. The water tasted warm. Amelia always replaced the bottles before they lost their chill because she knew he hated room temperature water. Ryan stared at the bottle for a second longer than necessary before setting it down harder than intended. This is insane, he muttered under his breath. He moved through the apartment restlessly after that. Bedroom, living room, office, back to the kitchen again. Everywhere he looked, tiny absences followed him quietly. The lavender candle Amelia lit every evening near the piano was missing. The throw blanket she used while reading near the windows was gone from the couch. Even the hallway lamp felt colder somehow, without her touching it every night before bed. Ryan stopped near the piano eventually and rested one hand against the polished black surface. Dust had already started settling lightly across the keys. He stared at them in silence. Amelia used to play almost every night when they first moved into the penthouse. Soft jazz melodies drifting through the apartment after midnight, while Ryan worked beside her with his laptop open. Back then, he used to promise he would take fewer meetings, be home more, slow down after the company stabilized. But success kept expanding, and somehow his marriage slowly disappeared into the spaces between conference calls and delayed conversations. Ryan checked his phone instinctively. No messages from Amelia. His thumb hovered above her name before he finally called. Straight to voicemail. He sighed impatiently. Amelia, come on, he said after the tone. This has gone far enough. Even while saying the words, part of him already understood something uncomfortable. Amelia had not sounded emotional this morning. She sounded done. Later that night, Ryan returned from the shower wearing sweatpants and a gray t-shirt, something Amelia always teased him for because successful businessmen apparently looked strange dressed casually. The memory almost made him smile until he noticed the bed. Her side remained perfectly untouched. Too neat. Too empty. Ryan climbed into bed anyway and reached automatically toward the nightstand for the glass of water Amelia usually left there every evening before sleep. Nothing. He froze for a second in the darkness. Then another realization hit him. There would never be another glass waiting unless he put it there himself. Ryan closed his eyes tightly while snow continued falling outside the windows. For years he thought Amelia's forgiveness meant their marriage was strong enough to survive anything. Now he was starting to understand something much worse. Every time she forgave him, she had also been growing a little more tired. 3 weeks after leaving Manhattan, Amelia Carter finally slept through an entire night without waking up anxious. Morning sunlight spilled softly across the hardwood floors of her small apartment near the Massachusetts coast, while ocean wind rattled lightly against the windows. The apartment was nothing like the penthouse she left behind. No marble counters. No floor-to-ceiling skyline views. No endless silence hiding beneath expensive furniture. Just warm light, unfinished design sketches spread across a wooden table, and the quiet sound of waves somewhere beyond the harbor outside. Amelia stood barefoot in the kitchen wearing an oversized cream sweater while coffee brewed slowly beside her. The scent filled the apartment gently. Real coffee this time. Not rushed coffee carried between meetings or forgotten beside cold dinners. She wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic mug and closed her eyes for a moment. Peace still felt unfamiliar to her. Not happiness exactly, but relief. Her phone buzzed once on the counter beside a stack of fabric samples. Ryan calling again. Amelia stared at the screen without touching it. 14 missed calls now. 8 voice messages. Dozens of texts ranging from frustration to apologies to confusion. She turned the phone face down and looked back toward the windows instead. Outside, pale winter sunlight stretched across the gray Atlantic water while small fishing boats drifted quietly through the harbor. The world kept moving. Amelia had almost forgotten life could feel this calm. A few hours later, she unlocked the front door to a small design studio downtown that still smelled faintly like fresh paint and sawdust. The sign on the glass window read Carter Interiors in simple gold lettering. Amelia stood there for several seconds before stepping inside. Years ago, before Ryan's company consumed both their lives, she dreamed about opening a studio exactly like this. Warm lighting, natural textures, spaces designed to make people feel safe instead of impressed. But after marriage, her dreams slowly became flexible things. Postponed things. Temporary sacrifices that somehow lasted years. Just until things settled down, Ryan used to promise. But success never settles. It only asks for more. Amelia placed her bag beside the drafting table near the windows and opened the blinds slowly. Morning light flooded the room instantly. Rolls of fabric lined the shelves beside unfinished mood boards and paint samples spread carefully across the table. Small space. Imperfect space. But it belonged to her. That realization tightened unexpectedly in her chest. For years, Amelia measured her worth through how useful she could be to someone else. Ryan's schedules. Ryan's dinners. Ryan's stress. Ryan's career. Somewhere along the way, she stopped asking herself what she needed to. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Amelia turned and saw the elderly florist from downstairs smiling through the doorway while holding a small vase of white flowers. "For your opening day," the woman said warmly. Amelia blinked in surprise. "That is very kind." The florist smiled gently while stepping inside. "You look lighter today than you did last week." Amelia glanced down at the flowers in her hands. White lilies. Fresh and simple. "I think I can finally breathe again," she admitted quietly. After the florist left, Amelia arranged the flowers beside the window and stood there for a moment watching sunlight move slowly across the studio floor. Back in Manhattan, Ryan was probably already inside another conference room, chasing another deal beneath artificial lights, and endless pressure. For years, Amelia believed loving him meant shrinking herself enough to fit inside his world. Now, standing inside the soft morning silence of her own studio with ocean air drifting through cracked windows, she finally understood something important. Love was never supposed to make someone disappear. The first person who truly listened to Amelia after her marriage ended did not ask her why she left. He asked if she had eaten that day. Rain drifted softly against the tall harbor windows of the Boston Art Gallery, while warm amber lights reflected across polished concrete floors, and quiet conversations echoed gently through the room. Amelia stood near a large abstract painting holding a paper cup of jasmine tea between both hands, while jazz music played low somewhere behind her. She had started coming to places like this recently. Small galleries, bookstores near the water, coffee shops where nobody knew her as Ryan Bennett's wife. The anonymity felt strangely comforting. Amelia tilted her head slightly while studying the painting in front of her. Deep blue tones mixed with pale silver strokes across the canvas like winter waves beneath moonlight. Lonely colors somehow. Honest colors. That one usually makes people emotional. The voice beside her was calm and low. Amelia turned slightly and found a tall man standing nearby in a dark charcoal coat with rain still clinging lightly to the shoulders. Early 40s maybe. Clean but understated. The kind of confidence that did not demand attention from a room because it already belonged there naturally. Maybe because it feels tired. Amelia answered softly before realizing she had spoken out loud. The man glanced back toward the painting thoughtfully. Or peaceful after surviving something difficult. Amelia looked at him more carefully then. Most people rushed to fill silence. This man seemed comfortable inside it. Julian Rhodes, he said politely, extending his hand. Amelia Carter. His handshake was warm and brief. No lingering charm. No forced charisma. Somehow that alone made Amelia relax slightly. Rain continued sliding slowly down the gallery windows while guests moved quietly through the exhibits around them. Amelia noticed Julian was holding tea instead of wine like everyone else. Jasmine tea. Same as hers. You do not seem like someone who enjoys crowded events, Julian observed gently after a moment. Amelia smiled faintly into her cup. I am learning how to exist in them again. He nodded once like he understood more than she said aloud. That unsettled her a little. Not in a bad way. Just unfamiliar. They eventually moved toward a quieter corner near the back of the gallery, where bookshelves lined the walls beneath soft golden lighting. For the first time in months, Amelia found herself speaking without carefully measuring every word beforehand. She talked about design work, coastal architecture, why certain rooms felt emotionally warmer than others. Julian listened fully the entire time. No checking his phone. No distracted nodding. No half attention. Amelia almost forgot how rare that felt. At one point, she paused suddenly after realizing she had been talking for nearly 10 minutes uninterrupted. Sorry, she said quietly. I probably sound ridiculous. Julian looked genuinely confused by the apology. Why? Amelia lowered her eyes slightly toward the tea in her hands. Most people stopped listening after the first few minutes. Silence settled softly between them while rain tapped gently against the windows nearby. Then Julian said something so simple it almost hurt her to hear. That sounds lonely. Amelia looked up immediately, not because of the words themselves, but because he noticed. Ryan used to hear her speak without really hearing anything underneath the words anymore. But Julian noticed exhaustion hiding beneath casual sentences after knowing her less than an hour. Amelia stared down into the steam rising from her tea while emotion tightened unexpectedly in her chest. I think I forgot what it feels like when someone pays attention, she admitted quietly. Julian leaned back slightly in his chair while soft jazz drifted through the gallery around them. Then maybe, he said calmly, you spent too long being invisible beside the wrong person. Outside, Boston rain blurred the harbor lights into soft gold reflections against the dark water, while Amelia sat there in the warm quiet of the gallery realizing something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Being understood should never feel surprising. 6 months later, Manhattan looked exactly the same. Cold winter lights reflected across wet streets. Black cars lined crowded curbs outside luxury hotels. Snow drifted softly between skyscrapers while people in expensive coats hurried beneath glowing storefronts without looking at each other. But Ryan Bennett no longer moved through the city the same way. The confidence he once carried so naturally had worn thin over the past months, replaced by a quiet exhaustion nobody around him fully understood. Success still surrounded him. Bigger contracts, more interviews, more money. Yet every night he returned to a penthouse that still felt abandoned no matter how many lights he turned on. The charity gala at the Whitmore Hotel was supposed to help distract him. Investors filled the ballroom beneath crystal chandeliers, while a string quartet played softly near the grand staircase. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying champagne and silver trays while camera flashes reflected against polished marble floors. Ryan adjusted the cuff of his black suit absent-mindedly while pretending to listen to a conversation about international expansion. Then the ballroom doors opened again, and suddenly the noise around him disappeared. Amelia stepped inside wearing a long black satin dress beneath a tailored cream coat lightly dusted with snowflakes. Her hair rested softly above her shoulders now, shorter than before, and for the first time in years she did not look emotionally exhausted. She looked calm, not happy in a loud, dramatic way, just peaceful in the kind of way people become after surviving something difficult. Ryan forgot to breathe for a second. Around him, conversations continued normally, but his entire body locked the moment he saw her crossing the ballroom beneath the golden lights. Amelia no longer looked like the woman who waited awake beside cold dinners hoping her husband would notice her sadness. She carried herself differently now, steadier somehow, like someone who no longer needed permission to exist fully. Ryan excused himself from the conversation without hearing his own words. His pulse beat heavily against his chest as he moved through the crowd toward her. Amelia noticed him almost immediately. Her eyes met his calmly across the ballroom, and Ryan felt that same painful realization again. She was no longer angry with him. She was past anger. Amelia. Her name sounded rough in his throat. She offered him a polite smile. "Hello, Ryan." The distance in her voice unsettled him more than shouting ever could. Ryan looked at her carefully beneath the warm chandelier light. No wedding ring. No sadness hiding behind forced smiles. Just quiet dignity. "You look," he stopped himself. Better felt too honest. Amelia glanced briefly toward the snowy windows before looking back at him. "How have you been?" she asked softly. Ryan almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. How had he been? Alone. Restless. Haunted by tiny memories that refused to leave him. The sound of piano music that no longer existed inside the apartment. Hallway lamps left dark. Empty kitchen counters. Silence everywhere. "Busy," he answered instead because he did not know how to admit the truth. Amelia nodded politely. The orchestra continued playing softly nearby while guests moved elegantly through the ballroom around them. Then Ryan noticed something else. Amelia no longer looked at him with hope. For years, even during arguments, she still carried some fragile hope that he would finally understand her. That hope was gone now, and somehow that hurt more than the divorce papers ever did. "I tried calling you," Ryan said quietly. Amelia lowered her eyes for a brief second. "I know. Why did you never answer?" She looked back at him calmly then. "Because every time I forgave you, Ryan, you learned I would stay." The words landed softly between them while snow drifted outside against the Manhattan skyline. Ryan felt his chest tighten painfully because he finally understood something too late. Amelia did not leave when she stopped loving him. She left when she realized loving him had slowly destroyed parts of herself. The moment that finally broke Ryan Bennett was not dramatic. It was small, quiet, barely noticeable to anyone else in the ballroom. Snow drifted softly outside the towering windows of the Whitmore Hotel, while golden chandelier light reflected across polished marble floors and champagne glasses. The orchestra played low, elegant music somewhere near the grand staircase while New York's wealthiest guests moved through the ballroom in expensive suits and black evening gowns. Ryan still stood facing Amelia near the windows, unable to look away from her. She looked different tonight. Not because of the dress or the shorter hair or the missing wedding ring. It was the way she carried herself now. Amelia no longer looked emotionally tired. She looked free. "I never meant to hurt you," Ryan said quietly after a long silence. Amelia studied him gently beneath the warm ballroom lights. "I know," she answered. And somehow those two words hurt him more than anger would have. Because she was telling the truth. Ryan had never intentionally tried to destroy his marriage. He simply assumed Amelia would continue absorbing disappointment forever. That assumption slowly became negligence. then habit, then normal. Ryan lowered his eyes briefly before speaking again. I would do things differently now. Amelia's expression softened slightly, but not with hope. More like sadness for something already gone. That is what makes this hard, she whispered. You probably would. Before Ryan could answer, movement beside them caught his attention. Julian Rhodes approached calmly through the ballroom crowd wearing a dark tailored coat over a charcoal suit, snowflakes still melting lightly against the fabric from outside. Several investors greeted him as he passed, but Julian's attention settled naturally on Amelia the moment he reached her side. No performance, no possessiveness, just quiet certainty. You disappeared, Julian said gently to Amelia. I was starting to think the gala bored you. Amelia smiled softly. Real smile this time. Ryan felt something sharp twist painfully in his chest seeing it. Julian glanced toward her bare shoulders almost immediately. You are cold. Before Amelia could respond, Julian removed his coat carefully and rested it around her shoulders with effortless familiarity. Such a small gesture. Simple, thoughtful, automatic. Amelia looked up at him with quiet gratitude while adjusting the coat lightly around herself. Thank you. Ryan stood frozen beside them while the orchestra music blurred into distant noise around him. Because suddenly he remembered every moment Amelia sat beside him cold in restaurants while he never noticed. Every taxi ride where she silently shivered beside him while he answered emails. Every winter event where she wrapped her own arms around herself because Ryan was too distracted to pay attention. Julian noticed in seconds what Ryan ignored for years. That realization hollowed something inside him completely. I should probably head back soon, Amelia said softly to Julian. Early meeting tomorrow. Julian nodded immediately. I will drive you. No hesitation. No inconvenience hidden beneath politeness. Just care. Ryan swallowed hard before finally speaking again. Amelia. She turned back toward him calmly while ballroom lights shimmered softly across the windows behind her. Ryan looked at her for several painful seconds, struggling to say something meaningful enough to repair years of emotional absence. But there were no perfect words left now. Only truth. I really thought you would always forgive me. Amelia stared at him quietly while snow continued falling across Manhattan outside. Then a faint sad smile touched her face. I know, she whispered. That is why you stopped trying. The words landed gently. Final. Ryan felt every memory crash into him at once afterward. The missed anniversaries. The interrupted conversations. The nights she cried quietly beside him while he promised he would do better after the next deal closed. Amelia had forgiven him so many times that he stopped fearing losing her entirely. And because of that, he lost her completely. Julian rested one hand lightly against Amelia's back then, guiding her gently through the ballroom toward the exit while warm lights reflected against the falling snow outside the windows. Amelia never looked back again. But Ryan stood there long after she disappeared into the Manhattan winter, finally understanding the cruelest truth of all. Some people do not leave because they stopped loving you. They leave because they finally realize love should not require surviving constant disappointment. The snow had almost stopped by the time Amelia stepped outside the Whitmore Hotel. Manhattan glowed beneath the winter night like a city trying too hard to look warm. Streetlights reflected gold against wet sidewalks while black cars moved slowly through the drifting snow along Fifth Avenue. Cold air brushed softly against Amelia's face as she tightened Julian's coat around her shoulders and exhaled slowly into the quiet. Behind them, the ballroom music faded each time the hotel doors opened and closed. For a long moment, neither Amelia nor Julian spoke. The silence between them felt easy, safe. The kind of silence that did not demand performance. Julian glanced toward her carefully while snowflakes melted against the dark wool of his coat resting over her shoulders. Are you okay? He asked gently. Amelia looked down the glowing Manhattan street ahead of them before answering. I think I finally am. Julian nodded once like he understood exactly what she meant without needing more explanation. That alone still surprised her sometimes. Months ago, Amelia used to explain herself constantly. Why she was hurt, why she felt lonely, why certain things mattered. She spent years translating her emotions into smaller, easier versions so Ryan would not feel overwhelmed by them. But people who truly care do not make love feel like convincing someone to pay attention. Behind the hotel windows above them, Amelia could still faintly see the ballroom glowing beneath crystal chandeliers. Somewhere inside that warmth and music, Ryan was probably standing exactly where she left him, still trying to understand how certainty became lost so quickly. But it was not quick at all. That was the tragedy. Amelia had been leaving emotionally for years while sitting right beside him every night. Ryan just never noticed until the silence became permanent. A cold breeze swept through the street as a car pulled slowly toward the curb nearby. Julian opened the passenger door for her automatically before pausing. "You do not have to talk about tonight if you do not want to." Amelia looked up at him beneath the soft city lights. There was no pressure in his face, no curiosity disguised as concern, just patience, real patience. She smiled faintly. "That is the strange thing," she admitted quietly. "I do not feel angry anymore." Julian leaned lightly against the car door while listening. Amelia glanced back once toward the towering hotel windows glowing against the snowy skyline. "For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant loving someone enough to stay no matter how much it hurt," she said softly. "But eventually I realized I was teaching him that losing me was impossible." Her voice stayed calm. No bitterness, just truth finally spoken out loud. Julian looked at her carefully for a moment before answering. "And now?" Amelia breathed in the cold winter air slowly. The city no longer felt heavy around her the way it used to. Manhattan once felt like a beautiful cage built from expectations, routines, and emotional exhaustion disguised as loyalty. Tonight it simply looked like a city again. "Now I think love should feel peaceful more often than painful," she whispered. Somewhere above them, snow drifted gently between skyscrapers while distant sirens echoed softly through the city night. Julian smiled faintly before opening the car door wider for her. Amelia slid into the warm leather seat while he walked around toward the driver's side. As the car pulled away from the curb, Amelia looked out the window one last time toward the glowing ballroom high above the street. She did not feel revenge. She did not feel triumph. And she definitely did not feel regret. What she felt was something quieter. Freedom. Inside the hotel, Ryan Bennett finally walked back toward the empty ballroom windows after standing alone for nearly 20 minutes. Snow covered the city outside while guests continued laughing and dancing behind him beneath the chandeliers. But Ryan barely heard any of it anymore. Because for the first time in his life, he understood something no amount of success could undo. Amelia did forgive him. Again and again and again. Until one day, she realized forgiveness was slowly costing her pieces of herself. And by the time Ryan finally learned how to value her properly, she had already learned how to live without him.